Okay, students, so welcome to your last minute review. First things first, I want to go ahead and apologize because I did not have time to write down every funky cha-cha for every single work in this unit because when I was doing it, my computer crashed. So you're just going to have to listen to my voice if you want to get every single work and all the information. So first up, our first work is Catacomb of Priscilla. Remember that catacombs are where people are buried. So for form, you're going to put stone passages underneath Rome, literally underneath the city, underneath the house of someone named Priscilla or Priscilla. These also contain fresco paintings, which remember are painted into the wall while it's wet, so they are part of the catacombs or part of the wall. For function, you have religious worship. For early Christians, remember that Christians had to worship in a secret or private place because the religion was illegal in the Roman Empire. For content within the catacombs, you have benches similar to Etruscan tombs. You have, of course, graves, shelves for the bodies, and frescoes. And for context, remember this work is in here to show the earliest version or earliest form of Christian art. It shows Jesus as a shepherd boy, and it represents the birth of Christianity, but also as an illegal practice. Next up, you're going to have Santa Sabina. Santa Sabina is a church that is located in Italy, in Rome. For form, you're going to have, this is a basilica plan, and because of that, you can compare it to the Basilica Oppia. However, unlike the Basilica Oppia or other Roman basilicas, Santa Sabina was meant as a Christian sacred space, a place of worship, a church. This is a Romanesque church. It's very early on in the Christian tradition of church buildings, which means that it is made with red brick and a wooden roof, which has been rebuilt and refurbished. Notice those squat little windows and the short way the building is made. For content, you can put something about the parts of the church. The nave where the congregation would be, the aisles where they would walk, and the apse at the end, which would contain the altar. Remember that this building shows that people in early Christian churches borrowed from Roman architectural practices. Next up, you're going to have number 50, the Vienna Genesis, which is the first couple of books of the Bible as illustrated in an illuminated manuscript. For form, you're going to have tempera paint, which we typically think of as egg paint, with overlaid gold and silver on vellum. Vellum is a special kind of paper made out of animal skin. It's very long lasting. For function, this is an illuminated manuscript, and it does tell Christian narratives, specifically the story of Rebecca and Eliezer at the well, and also Jacob wrestling the angel, before Jacob's name was changed to Israel. For context, you need to know this is a medieval example of a narrative art. It shows the characters more than once in a painting over and over to tell the story. If you would like to be familiar with those, then you can certainly Google them, look them up, or look them up in the Bible. Next up, you're going to have San Vitale, a very unique church. Remember, this is a Christian church meant for Christian worship. For form, you can put red brick with a wooden roof. The wooden roof did collapse and was rebuilt. This is a mainly Romanesque style, although we are going to see kind of a mishmash of styles, such as the flying buttresses on the outside are associated with the Gothic era, but they are kind of blocky, making them early Gothic. On the inside, we see Justinian and Theodora, the rulers of the Byzantine Empire, who have made mosaics of themselves. This way, when they are not in attendance at any of the worship services, their figures can stand in for the royalty, making you feel like you're worshiping with royalty. Not bad. For context, we have this combination of politics and religion. It's exemplary of the times about people using religious worship to kind of enhance their political stance and power. So speaking of political enhancement by religious power, we have Hagia Sophia up next. For form, this is a stone building, but it is a dome built on top of a square, which is one of the very easy ways to recognize it, especially in an architectural plan. For function, it was originally built as a Christian church by Constantine, who commissioned it after he had a vision and converted the entire Roman Empire to Christianity solely by himself. After that, it became a mosque and suffered a bout of iconoclasm in which which all of the religious Christian icons or images were destroyed. And now today it's a museum because it's been through so many changes we just can't make up our minds, so anybody can visit it at any time. This is located in Istanbul. That's Istanbul, not Constantinople. You can visit it today, and you need to make sure that you watch that video that I gave you for a podcast on this. Next up is the Merovingian looped fibulae. For form, this is going to be interlaced design and metalwork with precious stones. This would show wealth as its function. It would serve as a pin on the shoulder of someone's toga. And for content, you can have those animal shapes like dolphins or fish or birds. And you need to be able to say that this borrowed the interlaced designs from the Vikings and the Celts and the Romans, kind of bringing everything together in this artistic tradition of metalwork. Next up, you're going to have Theotokos and Child between Saints Theodore and George. Remember that Theotokos is the Virgin Mary. She's holding baby Jesus with the saints beside her, have angels in the back, and also the disembodied hand of God sticking out from a hole in the ceiling. For form, this is encaustic on wood. It is a religious icon, a Christian religious icon, which means a holy image. The encaustic method was adopted from Egypt, where they used it to paint portraits on coffins for those who cannot afford a golden sculpture such as King Tut. Also, you need to know that the religious figures are staring into the audience for a reason, and that reason is to make a personal connection with the people in the audience and make them feel as if they are involved in the service. So they are looking right at you, not to judge, but to make you feel like you have a connection with them. Next up, you're looking at the Lindisfarne Gospels. What you're looking at currently right now is the cross carpet page. We also have a portrait of St. Luke and another page. This is pigment on paper. It's tempera paint with actual gold. Remember that gold makes it an illuminated manuscript. It represents the power of the patron, because who else could afford gold on their manuscripts besides the Christian church? Now remember that all of these Gospels, including the Lindisfarne Gospel, were handmade by monks in monasteries all over the Christian realm. This one is specifically from England. For content, you need to know that this is pretty much the Bible. This is a Christian narrative. And for context, you need to know that the Lindisfarne Monastery was burned down by the Vikings, but some of the very ambitious monks managed to save the Gospels here that we see, the Lindisfarne Gospels, which still survive to this day. You also need to recognize those interlaced designs have something very close to do with Viking artwork and Celtic artwork in accordance with the Merovingian looped fibulae. Next, you're going to have the Great Mosque of Cordoba. This is located in Spain and was part of the Umayyad dynasty. The Umayyad prince moved from the Middle East. He was kind of expelled, and he came over to Spain, and he was like, I'm going to found this great Islamic dynasty that's going to wrap halfway around Europe. So he built the Great Mosque of Cordoba in that combination of political power through religion. This represents that in an Islamic way, the Muslim religion. For content, you need to know about the Hypostyle Hall, your Hypostyle Hall, horseshoe arches, Qibla Muqarnas, and other things that typically go with an Islamic mosque. Next up, you're going to have number 57, the Pyxis of Almugira. Pyxis is a container. This one is made out of carved ivory, and it represents the pretty much last surviving piece of the royal ivory carving tradition. Therefore, it represents the power of the patron. They think it was given as a gift to a ruler, a caliph, or a young king as his coming of age present, possibly on his 15th or 16th birthday. What it contains, literally contains, not today, but it was meant to be a holder for cosmetics or perfume, so makeup or perfume. Inside the carving is calligraphy, and that band at the top, you have animals and people and lots and lots of super detail. Next up, you're going to have the Church of St Foia, and if you would go ahead and do me a favor and look up a picture of the outside of the church, because you may or may not need to know it for the test, hint, hint, hint. For form, the actual church is a Romanesque style. That means it is kind of squat. It has short windows. It's made of red brick. It does not have flying buttresses, but has regular buttresses on the inside. For your other content, you do need to know that this has aisles, a nave, an apse, and a reliquary. The reliquary figure houses the relic, which is the bones of a dead 12-year-old girl who sacrificed herself and her life for her belief in Christianity. It is very important that you be able to answer the question, how does the form of the church help with its function? And what that means is that pilgrims will come from far and wide and travel all across the land with their sore feet and come into the church, and they will walk around the aisles, around the outside of the nave, because in case there's a church ceremony going on, you don't want to interrupt that. So we walk in around the aisles, and we're going to go back to the apse where the reliquary is, and we're going to possibly pray at the reliquary or maybe touch it, and we're going to progress out through the other side of the church and go under the tympanum, which you may want to look up on Khan Academy to find out what that's all about. But you need to know about the architecture and the pilgrimages for sure, and you need to know about the reliquary. Next up, you're going to have the Bayou Tapestry. The Bayou Tapestry, it was made in France, and it tells a narrative, a story of William the Conqueror versus Harold, the supposed King of England. Harold accidentally crowned himself king in the face of William, kind of spitting on his promise not to. So then, of course, William got all offended, and he had built up all his warriors and his ships and his horses, and he took them across the sea, and they had a banquet, and after the banquet, they killed everybody, and Harold lost. So this is something that definitely tells a narrative. You can also see the shields, the ships, the pots, the pans, the spears, the horses, the armor, all of these things in that woven string. This is on linen. Remember, it is a tapestry. But the important thing to remember is that this is being told from the opposite side of the battle. So Harold lost, but Harold's people were the ones who made the banner. Pretty cool. Next up, we have Chartres Cathedral, apparently pronounced Chart. So for form, this is a Gothic cathedral. Remember the soaring verticality. This is made of stone with those heavy glass windows, specifically the stained glass. For function, this is a Christian sacred space. And for content, you need to know about the stained glass windows, the flying buttresses, and the elaborate carvings, specifically on the portals and the jam figures and the tympanums on the outside. For context, this is an example of early through late Gothic style, because we have one wall that is almost Romanesque. It's barely even Gothic at all the way up to the height of the Gothic era with these flying buttresses and things like that. The thing that's important to remember about this is the Gothic style as a whole in its entirety. You need to know why it was so great, why they invented all of these different building materials and methods. So from here on out, I've run out of notes, and I'm sorry, you're just going to have to listen if you want the information. So for number 61, we have the Bible Moralisée. Remember that this is a moralized Bible. On the top, you have Blanche of Castile on the left and King Louis IX on the right. On the bottom, you have two creators of the book. This is an illuminated manuscript, and it would function as literally a gift to King Louis when he was coronated, or when he was crowned king during his coronation. And Blanche was his mother, and she gave it to him. Now, for context, you need to know that Blanche would give this to her young son as the brand new king of France, as a symbol of how he was going to rule morally and how he was going to follow those rules. Imagine that you were a French citizen and you can't read, and all of a sudden you see this beautiful gold book sitting somewhere, and you think, oh, our country is so rich and our king is so moral, and we're going to be taken care of, and that's going to be great. Now, also for context and content, you have the scenes from the Apocalypse, which is included in this work, and it would be pictures from the Bible, from the story of the Apocalypse or the end of the world, but also would be different characters from the times. So, for example, if you had a story about the dangers of greed and vanity in our modern times, we might have a picture of Kim Kardashian. So he would have normal, like, living people along with Bible figures. That's an important thing to remember. Next up, we're going to have the Röntgen Pieta. Remember that a Pieta is a picture or sculpture of Mary with Jesus in her lap after he has been taken down off of the cross. So for form, that's exactly what this is. It's a Christian symbol, a very powerful one. This is carved out of wood, so it kind of has a little bit of wear and tear on it that maybe stone would not have had. For function, this would sit at the front of the church and would aid worshipers during a church service. And for context, you need to know the purpose of this was to elicit emotion from the viewers, and that emotion is something like empathy or extreme sadness for Mary, who, remember, doesn't know that Jesus is going to be resurrected yet. So it's meant to make the congregation feel very close to Mary and this very strong, powerful emotion through that torn body and their drooped faces. Next up, you're going to have the Scrovegni, or the Arena Chapel. Remember that this was built by the Scrovegni family. Well, they paid for it anyways, and it was next to a Roman arena. The artist you need to know here is named Giotto. He painted everything inside the Scrovegni Chapel. For form, this is very small, very Romanesque and close. Those tiny windows, kind of squat, not very high. Red brick on the outside. For function, this was the Scrovegni's family's personal chapels where they can go and feel a very intimate relationship with the service and with the Lord. For content, you need to know that all of the paintings on the inside are frescoes. They're frescoes. And for context, Giotto was very much ahead of his time, reaching almost to Renaissance height in the depiction of the body, in which we see these very detailed folds of clothes and texture of skin. And as a side note, the blue on top is supposed to be heaven, with people looking out at you from some windows cut in the sky. Next, you're going to have something called the Golden Haggadah. A Haggadah is a Jewish work, a Jewish scripture or sacred text. So the Haggadah is the story of how the Jews escaped from Egypt, and also about the 10 plagues that the Lord imparted upon the Egyptians. So each holiday, once a year, the Jewish family would take this out and read it, and that is its function. For content, it has all these different stories, but it also has these figures that are incredibly detailed, very Gothic style, remember, with those long robes and pointy heads for some reason. You also need to know this is an illuminated manuscript. It is painted with gold and silver, and that's why it's in the 250, because it is extremely rare for somebody of the Jewish faith at this time to have enough money to afford this. So you have something about power of the patron here, and that gold and the Haggadah. Next up, you're going to have the Alhambra Palace. The Alhambra is located in Granada, Spain. This morning I told you something wrong. I told you the Umayyad dynasty owned this, but it did not. The Umayyad dynasty was an Islamic dynasty, and it was founded, the whole Islamic political scene was founded by the Umayyads, but it lasted for a really long time. So after the Umayyads were gone, the Moors kind of took over this, and so the Moors, or the Moorish people, are the people who are ruling the Islamic dynasty at this time. So the Moors have built this palace. Now, even though it is not a sacred space, it is a living space. We have lots of different things incorporated that are indicative of Islamic architecture, like muqarnas, long skinny columns, hippo-style halls, and most importantly, water, the fountains that represent purity and the gardens that represent heaven, and that's what you need to know. Also, this is called the Court of Lions, don't forget, because you can see the lions right there. Next up, you're going to have the city of Petra. Petra was a city that was an oasis located in the middle of the desert on a trade route from Europe to the east. And this is what you're looking at here, the treasury, which is carved stone facade. It's carved into the mountain. You watched a whole video on that, and wasn't it cool? So the cool thing about this, or the context that you need to know, is that because this city was on a trade route, this work shows the adoption of different techniques. So you have the urn from the Islamic East carved into the top, you have the pediment from Greece and Rome, and you have the Corinthian columns from Rome as well. So you can see this kind of conglomeration of all the artistic styles, just like you would have a conglomeration of population here, all trading on this route through the desert. So it kind of shows us how much the world was interacting at the time. Next, you're going to have number 183, the Kaaba. The Kaaba is a building made of stone that is located in Mecca, and it is the direction to which all Muslim people pray 5 times a day as one of the pillars of Islam. You are required to make a pilgrimage to Mecca at least once in your life. Now, please be clear that the Kaaba is not the actual thing that the people are bowing or praying to. They're just praying in its direction because it represents something very sacred having to do with the place that Muhammad left the earth. The Kaaba is covered with a cloth which is replaced once a year, very similar to how the Mosque of Gaya is rebuilt once a year. The cloth is called the kiswa, and it is embroidered with gold. If you need a refresher on the rest of the Kaaba symbolism, then you can go back and watch podcast episode number 21, which was about the Muslim religion. Next up, you're going to have the Dome of the Rock. The Dome of the Rock is a very important building. It is made out of stone and covered in ceramic tiles. At the top, you have a dome that is made out of bronze, not gold. The Dome of the Rock is a domed building that is sacred to Christians and Jewish people and Muslims. So you have all 3 religions that are holding one spot as very sacred. The reason for that is the rock located inside of the dome. For form on the inside, you can circumambulate around that rock in a very spiritual experience for no matter what religion you are. And the function is to house these pilgrims who are praying at this very, very important site. For content, don't forget that rock. And for context, don't forget this is in Jerusalem, which is a very much fought over and land at this time. You can even see it on the news probably every night. Next up, you're going to have the Great Mosque of Isfahan. Isfahan was a city that was founded by a Muslim king after he decided to move the capital of his empire. So the Caliph makes his new empire capital city in Isfahan, and he builds this mosque. And it's again that example of using politics and religion together. I'm going to build this huge mosque, this community center, to exert my power or to show my power in the city. Now, the cool thing about the Mosque of Isfahan is that it remains a large part of the city. So it's constantly being built onto, and you have all of these people that are just walking through it as a community center, not going for the mosque. Remember that we have schools here and different things as well. So while it does contain a mosque and therefore all the trappings that go with it, this is a big, huge deal. I mean, it's a huge building, but it's very important to the city. Next up, you're going to have the folio from a Quran. This is not just any Quran. This is an illuminated Quran, an illuminated manuscript. You do have gold into the calligraphy on the bottom right-hand side. Remember that the calligraphy is read from right to left. And we have the black script with those little red dots, which are part of the writing. For form, that's what you need to know about the calligraphy, and for function, it was a religious text. This is the story of the spider located in the Quran, which we looked up and read in class. For context, you need to know that this is so important because the Muslim people would never represent religious figures or nature in their drawings or in their art. So calligraphy is the highest form of art for them as far as religion. They would write this instead of painting pictures. Next up, we're going to have number 188, the Baptistry Basin, or the Baptistère de Saint-Louis. For form, this is metal and it is intricately designed. For function, it was originally not a religious object, but then when it made its way to France, it became a religious object. So it was probably just a decorative kind of bin or basin, but then when it came to France, it became a baptistry basin, which means that babies were baptized by the sprinkling of water that would come from the basin. For content, you need to remember about all those intricately carved little figures, animals, and people, and there's also a weird looking unicorn which apparently is named Yolanda here at the top. You also have the artist's signature over and over again within the carving. Next up, we're going to see Bahram Gur fights the Karg. Remember that the Karg is that nasty-looking horned wolf there at the bottom being trampled on by Mr. Bahram Gur's horse. So Bahram Gur is the king, and this illustration would come with text, which would tell his story, and it would come from a book, and the book would be called the Shahnameh, and the Shahnameh is the Book of Kings, and it tells all of these great, awesome stories and legends about kings in this empire. And this is going to come from the Mughal Empire, or what we sometimes call the Mongols, which we didn't really cover, but that's okay, we'll get to it later. So for content, you need to make sure you know the story, and for context, this is definitely power of the patron, because it's showing how great and powerful he is. Next up, you're going to have another illustration from the Shahnameh, the court of Gaya Mars. So if you look at this, it's important to see that the ruler, the person in charge, the main Mongol, is sitting in the middle, and he's kind of elevated, and he has that space bubble around him. And everybody else here is kind of around and down and kind of close together, but he's sitting by himself looking very, very important. Now this story, the fairy tale, I guess, that goes with it, or the legend that goes with it, is that this is from a time where humans lived in paradise and only wore the skin of leopards, which is why they're all clothed so strangely. This would be from another Shahnameh that was not located in the same one as the Bahram Gur fights the Karg illustration. However, they might have appeared together, the stories, but not the actual illustrations. Next up is going to be the Ardabil carpet. Remember that this carpet is really huge and massive. It would take up probably my entire classroom. Okay, well, almost, maybe half the classroom. Anyways, this is a carpet that was meant to go in the front of a mosque, but it was not a prayer rug. And instead of a prayer rug, it was just meant for kind of decoration. But mainly this is power of the patron, because the person who donated it spent a lot of money on this. Not just this one, but it did have a twin, which has since been destroyed. Now be sure to remember that this is woven out of wool as well as silk or cotton, to make sure that the dye would hold steadfast for so many long years. It has these very intricate designs, and it has calligraphy with quotes from the Quran, has lanterns that hang down in the middle, and is a great example of Eastern textiles at the time. And last but not least, we have the Taj Mahal. The Taj Mahal is a super cool building, and it was built by a Shah for his dead wife after she had his 14th child, which is kind of a lot, and he loved her so much that he built this entire palace pretty much to house her remains, and now his body lies there too, forever in repose. You still can visit the Taj Mahal today. It is made out of white marble. It has a mosque in it, but the minarets on the outside are purely for decoration, and no calls to prayer are ever issued from them. It is also surrounded by water, which, remember, in the Islamic religion and in this architectural style, water means purity, water means life, water means the garden of heaven, and water is very important. So that's something to remember about the Taj Mahal. So that's going to sum up your review. I am so sorry. It is about 4 o'clock now, and I cannot believe that my entire computer crashed. So I'm sorry you had to listen to my voice and that I went so quick. Remember that this is not required. So thank you for listening if you did, and I will see you in class tomorrow. Don't forget to study St. Foia and the reliquary and the pilgrimages for your test.